Welcome, and thank you for joining today's conference, the Q4 2023 report on market issues and performance. Before we begin, please ensure you've opened the WebEx chat and participant panels by using the associated icon on the bottom right corner of your screen. Please note that all audio connections are muted at this time. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, use the raise hand button in the lower right corner of the participant panel. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted, at which point please then state your name, the company you represent, and your question. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the Inteller Events host. With that, I'll turn the conference over to Ryan Kalinsky, Senior Manager, Monitoring and Reporting. Please go ahead.
All right, great. Thanks, Keegan. Welcome, everybody. Again, I'm Ryan Kurlinski, a Senior Manager in the Department of Market Monitoring, and I will be presenting today in our recently published Q4 2023 report on market issues and performance. The analysis in that report and that I'll be presenting on today was done by a team of analysts within DMM, and I'm just lucky enough to be the guy that gets to talk about the analysis that they did. Let's see, one note here is that this meeting is being recorded for everybody's convenience. If you do plan on quoting something I say today, I would definitely appreciate if you reached out to me and confirmed that that quotation in case I misspeak. So today I'm going to go over first going to go over a few high-level results from the fourth quarter of 2023. And then I'm going to plan on talking in more detail about two specific issues that were particularly relevant in the fourth quarter of 2023. And then if there's time, I will go into a little more detail on a couple of settlement issues that first one impacted CAISO load serving entities and exports, and the second one impacted congestion rents and uplift allocated out to WEIM entities. So with that, I will get going on some of the high-level stuff from the fourth quarter. So, I mean, kind of the biggest overall story for the market for the fourth quarter of 2023 was that gas prices were significantly down compared to the fourth quarter of 2022, and in particular, that's driven by the extremely high prices that we saw in December of 2022 that went over into January 2023. Right, so we saw so here we're looking at the average monthly natural gas prices by hub for the four kind of major natural gas hubs that impact the WEIM areas. We see the prices were about a third in the average natural gas prices were about a third in the fourth quarter of 2023 compared to the fourth quarter of 2022. So that's clearly going to have significant impact on the wholesale electricity market prices. So here we're looking at the solid lines in blue, yellow, and green. Those are the monthly load-weighted average electricity prices for the California ISO in the three markets there, the day-ahead 15-minute market and 5-minute market. And then it's also plotted along with the dotted black line, which is the monthly average SoCal City gas price. So you continue to see a very strong correlation between wholesale electricity market prices and natural gas prices. And obviously that's because wholesale electricity market prices continue to be set much of the time by natural gas resources. And when they're not set by natural gas resources, probably set by maybe some storage resources whose prices are based on the opportunity costs of not getting a wholesale electricity market price that's based on a natural gas resource. Yeah, so again, so the wholesale electricity market prices, down significantly, and following the large decrease in the natural gas prices from Q4 2022. So on average here over the three markets, electricity prices in Q4 2022 were about $136 per megawatt hour, and in this fourth quarter of 2023, they're all the way down to they're about 60% down to $55 per megawatt hour. So This graph showing the monthly average day-ahead peak prices for the bilateral market indices on the Intercontinental Exchange. That's Mid-Columbia in light blue, Palo Verde in yellow. And this peak, those peak blocks cover averaging 7 to 22, I believe, on all days except Sundays and holidays. So we're comparing that to CAISO average day-ahead prices in CAISO, which are the dotted lines, PG&E and SCE prices, and those are also average day-ahead prices over those same hours, 7 to 22, all days except Sundays and holidays. And what I think the main thing to note here is that, right, so average bilateral prices are down significantly in the fourth quarter of 2023, again, due to the decrease in gas prices, but that we do see the prices at Mid-Columbia are higher than prices in Palo Verde and CAISO, and that's due to challenging hydro conditions that continued from the summer up in the north, continued into October, and also some in late November. And that resulted in those Mid-Columbia prices being higher than CAISO prices in Palo Verde. I think that does also reflect some of the trends we saw in the WEIM electricity prices. In October, we did tend to see power flowing from southwest areas, CAISO, California, WEIM areas, up to the northwest and some of the mountain areas up in the north. And so their prices tended to be higher during most hours, actually up in the north, due to transfer congestion and flow-based congestion, preventing some of the lower priced resources in the south from displacing the higher cost resources up in the north. So here we're looking at hourly load-weighted average energy prices for the fourth quarter of 2023. Blue is the day-ahead, yellow is 15-minute market, the green is the 5-minute market, and that's plotted along the same. So then the price is there on the left axis. It's plotted together with the average net load. That's on the right axis. We continue to see that the shape of the wholesale electricity market prices follows the average net load shape. But something else I want to continue to point out, this is an important part of the market, so we'll talk about this more in these next few slides here, is that we notice in the peak net load hours, say 18 to 21, we do see the day-ahead market and the 15-minute market prices higher on average than the 5-minute market prices. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which we will talk about on the next couple of slides. Okay, so one of the major reasons for the 15-minute market and day-ahead market price being higher than the 5-minute market price is tool operators use to adjust the load forecast that's used in the different real-time markets. So this graph, the solid green and orange lines, is the adjustment that CAISO operators make to the load forecast as an input to the hour-ahead market and the 15-minute market, and that was for the fourth quarter of 2023. The blue line is the adjustment that operators make to the load forecast used in the 5-minute market in 2023. So what we can see here is that operators, on average, and also on average, are consistently increasing the load that's used in the hour and 15-minute market up to a significantly higher level than they're increasing the load forecast used in the 5-minute market, and that's over these peak net load hours. And those are the same hours we just looked at, which on average had higher 15-minute market and day-ahead market prices than 5-minute market prices. And so it is worth noting is looking at the dotted orange and green lines and the dotted blue line. Right, those are the same, that the operator load adjustment in the hour and 15-minute market and the 5-minute market respectively for 2022, fourth quarter 2022. It is worth noticing that in those peak net load hours, the operator adjustment to the 15-minute market and hour and market load adjustment, it has gone down. But in some of the, in the tightest hours in in Q4, we do still see some significantly high operator adjustment in those hour and 15-minute markets. So to kind of segue to the next topic, the reason that the operators do this load adjustment, especially of these net peak load hours, is to address uncertainty. So they will increase the load forecast used in the hour ahead market to try to address uncertainty that may materialize in the resources that end up being available and in load the uncertainty may materialize between the start of the hour ahead market run and real-time power. And so the idea of doing this load adjustment, load bias, is to try to get more hourly block imports into CAISO to potentially ramp up and commit more resources inside the CAISO balancing area, to ramp up maybe slower ramping resources to be ready, and to provide additional supply in case uncertainty in the supply and load or load materializes. And then in the tightest conditions, the load bias is also intended to not give awards to hourly block exports out of the CAISO balancing area if there's not enough supply in the CAISO balancing area to meet CAISO load plus those self-scheduled exports. So that is an important tool for the operators for real-time reliability in tight conditions. Again, is potentially having exports, hourly block export self-schedules not receive hour-ahead market awards. All right. Okay, so now those are kind of the high-level issues I think I was going to talk about for Q4. For the rest of this 47 minutes we have here, I want to focus on a few special issues. The first one I talked about quite a bit when I presented on the Q3 2023 report. So this slide is intended to be give us a review of this action. So here, and the next thing I'll talk about are some manual operator actions which had a significant impact on the WIM and most of the balancing areas within the WIM. So again, this is intended to be a review. What this graph shows are the dynamic WEIM imports in the hourhead market in the blue bars, and dynamic WIM imports from the 5-minute market in the red bars. So a reminder, I want to go over what the ISO did here in terms of what they started doing on July 26th, 2023, and they continued taking this action during the peak net load hours through November 15th. And so what they did was they limited the dynamic WEIM import transfers into the CAISO balancing area during those net peak load hours in the hour-ahead market, in the 15-minute market, but they did not limit the WM transfers into the CAISO balancing areas in the 5-minute market. And so we can see, looking at July 26th, right, hourning 19, for instance, you see that hourning 19, before the ISO started limiting transfers in the hour-ahead market, we see the blue bars. Those are WM imports transfers into the CAISO in the hour-ahead market. So those were coming in hourning 19. Red bars in that hour are showing that there were WM imports into the CAISO balancing in the 5-minute market. But then when you get to hourning 20 on July 26th, we don't see the blue bars anymore. Right? The ISO limited the import transfers in the hour-ahead market and the 15-minute market, but we still do see the red bars, right? So the ISO did allow import transfers into the CAISO in the 5-minute market. So a quick review, try to do a quick review about why the ISO did this during the tight conditions there in late July and in mid-August. And so again, when I talk about the last slide, right, the load bias, right, the intention of that hour market load bias is to get additional imports, to get additional internal CAISO capacity online in order to address uncertainty that may materialize in generation and load between the hour market run and real time. And in extreme conditions, right, like I said from the last slide, it's intended to the load bias if there's not enough supply to meet CAISO load and subscheduled exports. That load bias is intended to reduce exports, to not allow exports, not allow exports to have to get awards in the hour-ahead market. But as you can see, let's start focusing here on July 25th, hour earning 19 on July 25th. When the CAISO reg bias is to load up in the hour-ahead market, the CAISO may not be getting that extra supply just from imports and internal resources. Some of that supply may be met by WEIM imports, advisory WEIM imports in the hour-ahead market. And that's what we see in the blue bar here in hour earning 19. The concern is that if some of that load bias and supply is met by WEIM import transfers in the hour-ahead market, if those transfers do not end up not materializing, right, in the 5-minute market, then if uncertainty materializes, there may not be enough total supply to meet CAISO load plus hour-ahead exports. So it could be a reliability issue. And so that's a condition which we see here on July 25th, hour earning 19, and July 26th, hour earning 19. Right. So these are hours when CAISO had significant hour-ahead market load bias. I think it was up to 5,000 megawatts in order to get additional capacity. Each of these hours, we see that supply is met by a significant quantity of WEIM import transfers in the hour-ahead market. But then when you get to the 5-minute market, those transfers didn't materialize. And so I think the concern for the CAISO is that there could be a reliability risk and could result in having to cut either exports or CAISO load. But so I think to go kind of one level further there, a major reason why there is a significant reason in these conditions when CAISO does have when exports and export hourly blocks may have to be cut, when they may not be able to get awards, then that actually creates the condition in which one would actually expect for these advised WEIM transfers to not show up in the 5-minute market. So, for instance, think about an export out of CAISO from the perspective of a WEIM area. When the hour-ahead market runs, the optimist, right, that WEIM area is putting in that export out of CAISO as an input, as a supply input in its base schedule. So the hour-ahead market sees that export out of CAISO as being supply available. So the hour-ahead market may see that there's additional supply available to then flow back into CAISO as an advisory WEIM transfer. And that's blue bar here in hour earning 19. However, in this hour, right, hour earning 19, July 25th, hour earning 19, July 26th, with CAISO bias and a load up, a lot of those exports did not get schedules, right? They did not get hour market awards. So when you get to the 5-minute market, there's less supply. The 5-minute market doesn't see that supply as being available, and so then there will be less supply to actually flow into CAISO, right, to meet exports and load. And so the ISO did this action, which is to limit WEIM import transfers into the CAISO BA in the 50-hour market, 50-minute market, but not in the 5-minute market, in order to try to protect reliability, and specifically so that when they're doing the load bias, that the additional supply that they get would be met by hourly block imports, internal supply, and as we saw in this hour 19 on these 2 days on July 25th and July 26th, cutting exports. There's not enough supply, as opposed to having supply being met by WEIM transfers into the CAISO BA, which may not materialize in the 5-minute market. And again, because if those exports are cut, there will actually be less supply in the 5-minute market than the hour market saw. All right. And I'll take questions after I get through each of these sections. So the CAISO continued to limit WEIM transfers in the CAISO BA in the fourth quarter. They did it all of October and then through November 15th. DMM did try to do a bunch of analysis to try to assess what was the impact, right? What kind of changes did that result in? And it's really difficult. We looked at all kinds of different ways of doing this. So looking at the hour, looking at the hour before transfers, before each hour each day, before when there's no limitation versus what the supply and demand was after the limitation was put in place. We looked at the first half of November versus the second half of November, and it's difficult to make any conclusions because in all these situations, things are changing, right? So for instance, let's look at November 15th, hour ending 15. This graph shows the components of demand and the components of supply in the CAISO balancing area. So demand, you've got load bias in red, exports and WM exports in light blue. Supply, you've got generation in light green, imports in dark green, and then WM imports in the gray and striped black. To kind of compare the demand and supply from hour ending 15 on November 15th, which is right before the limitation was put in place, compared to hour ending 16. On this day, you do see that imports go up, right? Hour ending 16 compared to hour ending 15. Internal generation goes up. But if you compare hour ending 16 on November 15th to November 16th, that's all very similar. So it's difficult. It's really difficult to conclude that ISO's actions in limiting these transfers had a significant impact on supply and demand. Aside from what I think is kind of the main thing we see is that it impacted WM transfers in and WM transfers out of CAISO. So really kind of look at before the lock was in place on November 15th, hour ending 15. You've got more WM transfers into CAISO, that's the black and gray bar, and you've got a decent amount of WM transfers out of CAISO, the light blue bar on the top. But then you go into the lock periods, you get significantly less WM transfers into CAISO and less transfers out of CAISO. And kind of comparing the lock period on the 15th to the same hours on the 16th, that's kind of the trend we see. So really, I think the impact on the market during this period when there wasn't a clear reliability need to be limiting these transfers, it seems like the main impact we got, aside from prices we'll talk about next, the main impact on actual quantities of megawatts flowing was that there's less transfers going into CAISO, less WM transfers into CAISO, and less transfers going out of CAISO. So kind of less flows and less WM flows through the market due to this limitation in the 15-minute market. But limiting the transfers in the 15-minute market definitely had a significant impact on prices. So this graph is showing the prices. It's the average 15-minute market prices during the WEM import limitation from the first half of November, November 1st, November 15th. The limitation was in place, I think, for almost all those days. The limitation was in place from hours 16 to 20. And this shows that the total price in each balancing area is this dark blue bar, and then the dark blue line, sorry, and then the bars show the components of LMP for the different components of LMP that make up the dark line price. So we see here is the red. So the light blue is the system marginal energy price. That's the same for all balancing areas. And then the red is transfer congestion. So what this graph is showing is that for just about every balancing area had during the time when the transfer limitation was in place had transfer congestion into the CAISO balancing into the CAISO balancing area. The transfer congestion was driving prices down in their areas in the 15-minute market relative to the CAISO balancing area, and we can see that from this dark blue line that overall the prices in the 15-minute market in most of the other areas in WIM were significantly lower than the 15-minute market prices in the CAISO balancing area. Let's compare that then to the period when there was not the transfer lock in place, the transfer limitation in place, and that's, so for this we used November 16th to 30th, the same hours, hours 16 to 20, right? So CAISO stopped limitation on the 16th. So here, notice that when there was not the transfer limitation in place in the 15-minute market, the 15-minute market prices does not have that significant transfer congestion from the rest of the WIM into the CAISO BA, and prices, the overall LMP, the dark blue line, is actually very similar between the different balancing areas and between most different balancing areas in WIM. El Paso and PowerX had some other issues. And then also, if you recall that this graph, oops. Again, we want to compare, just going back up here, that we just looked at, right, the 15-minute market prices when the transfer lock was in place. Now I want to compare that to the 5-minute market during that same period. So this is the 5-minute market prices by price component when the WM transfer limitation was in place in the 15-minute market. But again, in the 5-minute market, that transfer limitation was not in place. And so we see here, again, in the 5-minute market without the transfer limitation, we do not see that significant transfer congestion from the rest of the WIM into CAISO. And we see RTD, the 5-minute market prices, being much more similar across the different balancing areas than we saw in the 15-minute market. So that's the background. So what's the conclusion there, right? Is that this transfer limitation that was put in place, just the 50-minute market, kept in place to the fourth quarter. It did have a significant impact on prices, right? It created significant congestion differences in the 50-minute market, particularly from the southwest balancing areas into the CAISO balancing area. And it created price differences between the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. So in CAISO, this limitation contributed to increasing 50-minute market prices during these hours relative to the 5-minute market. In the southwest balancing areas in particular, it contributed to having 50-minute market prices that were less than 5-minute market prices. So I think we conclude that this does likely have, it could have a detrimental impact on efficiency by resulting in less efficient commitments in the 15-minute market. Right, so commitments aren't done in the 5-minute market. The committing of resources is done in the 15-minute market and advisory intervals in the 15-minute market. And so if we have the systematic modeling difference between the 15 and the 5-minute market, we can get inefficient commitments. And so let's get to the ISO. We asked, we spoke to ISO about, why they stopped doing this on November 16th. And they said it's because they implemented enhancements. They implemented some software enhancements to address the issue of export self-schedules. If they get those export self-schedules reduced in HAST, the enhancements help to deal with the situation of exporters potentially trying to tag those exports back up to their self-schedule levels. And so I think, for me, this confirms that the reason that the ISO was was doing, was implementing this limitation does have to do with situations when there's a risk of export self-schedules out of CAISO having to be cut. There's a risk of them not being able to get, of having them not have power-ahead market awards. And so, I think, that does raise questions, right? Because in October, November, we didn't see those conditions, right? We didn't see conditions when exports may need to be cut. And a fair point is that the CAISO maybe doesn't know that going into it. They don't know that those conditions aren't going to be there and certainty can materialize. So I think then the question going forward is, and recommendations we have is for the ISO to be kind of more transparent and maybe and to have some more discussion about when is the ISO going to use this transfer limitation in the 15-minute market going forward. So the software enhancements have gone in place. Does that mean that they will not be doing this transfer limitation at all in 2024? And my interpretation is probably not, right? I mean, a tool or an enhancement that could help prevent exports that get cut in our market from then retagging up, that doesn't protect from the situation I talked about earlier, right? Which is where if exports are actually cut, like they were on July 25th, RD19, then that will result in, that result in less supply in the 5-minute markets, that those transfers are actually less likely to flow in the 5-minute market to CAISO. So it does seem like that those enhancements by themselves are not enough to prevent the CAISO from using this tool going forward. Based on what understanding of why they use this tool, it seems like they still may need to do it. So we are asking the ISO to better explain, maybe have some discussion with stakeholders about the conditions in which they're going to use this transfer limitation going forward, and reasons why they did it in the past and why they would do it going forward. I think that could also potentially lead to consideration of, are there alternative methods that the CAISO balancing area could use to achieve these same reliability results, aside from this transfer limitation, which does create a systematic modeling difference, right, between the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. Okay, so that's issue 1. With that, let's stop for questions before I go on to the next issue. Please.
If you would like to ask a question, you can use the raise hand icon in the bottom right corner of the participants panel. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted, at which point please then state your name, the company you represent, and your question. Once again, you need to have the participants panel open to access the raise hand feature, which will be found in the lower right-hand corner. All right, we do have a caller in queue. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, Brandon Pufall from Tucson Electric Power. Two quick questions. Earlier when we had previously met on this, I think one of the requests to the DMM was to do a review of the actual financial impact to specifically Desert Southwest entities as far as what the impact was of that congestion being assigned to Desert Southwest entities. Is that included in this review at a later stage, or if not, why was that not included in, I guess, the review?
Right. So I mean, it's difficult to. I mean, it'd be difficult to assess the impact on on particular entity settlements, right? So like what we showed here is that this transfer limitation definitely had an impact on having less congestion in the 5-minute market than in the 15-minute market, and we also concluded that this contributed to raising 5-minute market prices in the Southwest area to be higher than prices in the 15-minute market, which can then result in winners and losers depending on whether or not particular load or supply is buying or selling in the 15-minute market and 5-minute market. So so I think that would be a very in-depth analysis to try to kind of re-go through everyone's settlements, and we don't know exactly, I don't think we can estimate exactly what the changes were in prices due to this. But I think our goal here has been to point out that this is a significant operator action that has had a significant impact on prices in the 15 to 5-minute market, particularly in the Desert Southwest. And so we're encouraging ISO to work on communicating about when this will be done in the future, and potentially looking at alternative ways of accomplishing the liability goals without having this kind of market impact.
Okay. Second question. So I guess in summary, what I'm hearing is that the ISO said that this was a reliability decision, but if I'm hearing it correctly, it really came down to protecting exports from the ISO from the Hasbron that were awarded. So I guess I'm curious as how do we reconcile calling this a reliability action when it was really to protect export awards, which are purely financial and economical?
Okay, and again, and I can't a lot. So some of what I say is hypothesis, right? I can't speak for the ISO. I'm the Department of Market Monitoring. We're the independent market monitor. But what I can say is from the CAISO's perspective, in taking these actions, what they were doing was enhancing the reliability of both the CAISO VA and the VAs in the West who were accepting who were trying to get the exports out of CAISO, right? So if an export clears the hourly market, but then subsequently has to be cut after the hourly market awards come out, so closer to flow, my understanding is that that's a much bigger this has a much bigger impact on reliability than having the warning ahead of time. If you're an exporter getting power out of CAISO, that at the time the hourly market runs, that power actually won't be available to you. So my understanding is that it was meant to improve reliability of not just the CAISO VA, but also the balancing areas that are receiving the exports.
Right, but I guess as an EIM entity and as a separate BA, we take on the responsibility of ensuring reliability for ourselves and to ensure that we can supply the load external from the market. That's the essence of the balancing and the sufficiency test results. I still don't hear how this is wholly a reliability issue if at the end of the day it's to protect the financial exposure of liquidated damages of the exports that the HASP awarded and not having that fall within a certain entity. I mean,
That's
it to
not,
protect liquidated damages, a decision cannot be that's not a reliability event.
okay, I mean, that's not my understanding of why they were doing this. My understanding was that it was to try to ensure that the awards that come out of the outright market results in having enough supply to meet CAISO load plus exports that cleared the outright market. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, I guess I just differ on what I would call a reliability event, but thank you.
Okay, yep, thanks. Any other questions? Or go on to the second issue.
I'm not showing any other questions at this time.
All right, I will plow ahead into this one then. Okay, so the second issue wanted to talk about today, that's relevant for the fourth quarter of 2023, is the operator's load adjustment to the residual unit commitment process. So the residual unit commitment process is it is part of the day-ahead market. It runs after the financial portion of the day-ahead market, and it's intended to ensure that there's ultimately enough supply that shows up in real time to meet real-time load. Right, the financial portion of the day-ahead market has virtual bids. Load may not clear up to the load forecast. So what comes out of the financial portion, there may not be enough physical supply that gets scheduled in the day-ahead market to ultimately meet load in real time. So the point of the residual unit commitment market is to help ensure that there's enough supply in real time. And so some things, so right, there's a few components that go into the RUC requirement. This graph shows the various components, various determinants of the RUC procurement. So I talked about the green bar, right? If you have virtual supply in the financial portion of the day-ahead market, even if load clears up to the forecast, you may not get physical supply up to the load forecast, and so that may require getting some additional capacity in the RUC. Similarly, if load doesn't, the blue bars is a RUC requirement based on the fact that load may not clear up to the load forecast. The red bar is what we're going to focus on these next few minutes here, and that's operators can adjust the load requirement used in RUC. And my understanding is a large portion of what that red bar operator adjustments are intended to cover is uncertainty in what generation and what generation and load, what uncertainty may be between generation and load between the day-ahead and the real time that may result in, if you don't procure extra capacity, besides what got IFM schedules, that if you don't get extra capacity with must offer obligations to bid into real time, then you may not have enough supply in real time to meet load. And so what we're seeing here, the red bars is the operator adjustments to RUC, and we see significant increases right in those RUC load adjustments in Q3 and Q4 of 2023 compared to the same quarters of 2022. Q4 in particular, we're seeing an average of 2,560 megawatts per hour of operator load adjustment in the RUC, and that's up from 580 megawatts an hour in the fourth quarter of 2022. And that has implications on costs, right? That capacity isn't free. The main cost from procuring more capacity in RUC is from the bid cost recovery process. This graph shows the breakdown of bid cost recovery between various components. So the day-ahead bid cost recovery is in blue. Then yellow is an estimate of the real-time bid cost recovery that CAISO has to pay, and the real-time bid cost recovery that WIM areas have to pay. That's yellow and green. We see comparing Q4 2022 to Q4 2023. In 2023, all those other components went down. The bid cost recovery from other markets went down. Bid cost recovery to WIM went down, but the bid cost recovery from RUC, that's the red, that went up significantly. That more than doubled in Q4 2023 compared to Q4 2022, up from about $24 million in Q4 2022, up $29 million to about $53 million in Q4 2023. So the increased operator adjustment wasn't free, right? There's a trade-off between reliability and cost, and it did have an impact on increasing cost. in the fourth quarter of 2023. And so here's another way of looking at this. And this is a graph that we put in, I think, our February public board memo. And since then, you know, the ISO has picked up this issue, and the MSC has too, and discussed this more. But this is showing the average RUC adjustment by day in 2022, which is the red line. 2023 is the blue line. So we can really see there that in 2023, in the third and fourth quarters, that the RUC adjustment was significantly higher in 2023 than 2022. What we're also looking at in this graph is that the ISO, you know, made some significant changes to their methods for determining the RUC, this RUC load adjustment. So in May, starting in May there, the first arrow on the left, we see that the ISO experimented with having no RUC adjustments. And then starting in late June, early July, the ISO started basing the uncertainty portion of this RUC load adjustment on the uncertainty between the day ahead, and real time. In particular, they started using the Mosaic quantile regression, which is the same method they use for uncertainty for the flexible ramping product. They used the Mosaic quantile regression to try to procure enough capacity to cover 97.5th percentile of uncertainty between the day-ahead net load forecast and the real-time net load forecast. So we see that method resulted in significantly higher RUC load adjustment for most of the second half of 2023. But then in the end of 2023, December 21st, they then adjusted the method again. And actually, ISO doesn't like when I use the term method because they still continue to use the Mosaic quantile regression to determine what the RUC adjustment should be. But instead of procuring for the 97.5th percentile of uncertainty between day-ahead net load and real-time net load, they started procuring under normal conditions for just the 50th percentile of uncertainty. And really, you know, if you, yeah, and there's still, this is still a method they're using today. It's an operating procedure 1210, and the ISO has talked about this, about, you know, their method now for doing this RUC adjustment in some public meetings. And so what they're using system conditions. So instead of just procuring to certain percentile of uncertainty between day and real time, they're first using system conditions on, you know, system tightness or other system conditions to determine whether or not they're going to use the RUC adjustment to procure for the 50th percentile of uncertainty, the 75th percentile of uncertainty, or in really tight system conditions, the 97.5th percentile of uncertainty in the day ahead and real time. So thinking about what the 50th percentile means, in the normal conditions, essentially the RUC adjustment is not procuring for any uncertainty, right? It's the 50th percentile means that half the time they're not going to be procuring any capacity for, you know, for uncertainty that may materialize. And so I think what this kind of shown is that the primary determinant of what the ISO is trying to procure for in RUC is not to meet a certain amount of uncertainty between the day-ahead net load forecast and the real-time net load forecast, right? The primary determinant, the initial determinant, is to look at system conditions. The system conditions in terms of how tight is the system. So, and again, I have not run this by the ISO, but one example might be, in normal conditions, the ISO may not be trying to procure to meet a certain amount of uncertainty between the day and real-time net load forecasts, because in normal conditions, it may be expected that if they don't procure anything in RUC, right, they don't procure any extra capacity to deal with uncertainty, that they're confident that they'll be able to get capacity from resources either outside CAISO or resources inside CAISO that have not received RUC awards, that don't have capacity awards coming out of RUC. And so I think, for this kind of raises a couple, I think a couple of issues going forward, and some things to consider. A couple things to consider going forward. The first is going into the summer and next summer. I think we're kind of asking the ISO and suggesting it would be beneficial if the ISO maybe provided more clarity onto what these system conditions are that would determine which percentile of uncertainty they're going to plug into the Mosaic quantile regression to try to cover. You know, and it suggests that if, given that there are other conditions which are determining how much capacity the CAISO actually needs, right? Coming out, you know, how much capacity needs to procure coming out of RUC, it suggests that there could be potentially better methods, more direct methods of looking at what are the system conditions that are determining how much capacity is needed, and then potentially designing and developing another method that may more directly calculate and determine what the amount of capacity may be needed from RUC, extra capacity from RUC, extra capacity determined to cover uncertainty, than just, you know, what we're currently seeing is a little bit of a black box of, you know, there's system conditions, and then if it's normal conditions, then we're not going to procure any capacity for uncertainty. If it's kind of tight, then we're going to procure the 75th percentile. And if it's really tight, we're going to try to procure to cover almost all uncertainty at the 97.5th percentile. So we're just suggesting that there may be, maybe with more discussion, more transparency, there may be a way to, there may be a better method to more directly determine what the actual capacity requirements are coming out of RUC. And then the next point is that this does have implications for the demand curve for the imbalanced reserve product. So right, the demand curve is the CAISO is currently planning on having the demand curve for the imbalanced reserve product, which is going to be in the IFM, the financial portion of the market. It's going to be taking the Mosaic quantile regression method to look at different levels of uncertainty between day ahead and real-time net load. And then that assumes, though, then that if for each one of those potential realizations of uncertainty, that if that capacity is not procured in the day-ahead market as an imbalanced reserve product, that there will be a power balance violation in real time. But if under normal conditions, what we're seeing is that the actual reliability need is to procure to the 50th percentile, right? So if we're only procuring enough capacity to cover, to not cover any uncertainty in the upward direction, then that implies that under normal conditions, that there isn't really any value in procuring extra capacity. And again, one reason may be because, and we've talked about this in public comments, that in normal conditions, it may be safe to assume that you don't actually need capacity above the expected real-time net load forecast. You don't need that to have must-stop obligation in the day-ahead market, because you can expect resources that don't have an imbalanced reserve award or a must-stop obligation RUC award. You can expect them to still show up. There's going to be extra capacity in the West. So this kind of implies that there may be that by talking more explicitly about what the actual system conditions are that are more directly driving the need to procure capacity in the day-ahead market, that we may be able to come up with a better demand curve for the imbalanced reserve product, and that the current design may be it may overvalue the imbalanced reserve product in the upcoming extended day-ahead market. That's all I have for this topic. We can take questions on that, and if we have time, I'll see if we can talk about it quickly, a couple of settlement issues, but we'll see. I see JK.
All right, we'll go ahead and unmute JK.
Hi, this is JK Wong from PGE. Thank you for the presentation, Ryan. I have a quick question. In the memo, I believe was this February, also mentioned that the change of the RUC adjustment has an impact on the exports cleared. But I just want to get your insights here. Do you believe the significant rise of RUC adjustment actually gave us a better idea of how much export shall be cleared and avoid real-time curtailment? Is it have a positive impact in the market in that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look at this graph, you can see, and under the tightest conditions, right? So September 2022, mid-August 2023, right? When there may be reliability issues that, in those situations, it's clearly important for the residual unit commitment market to procure enough capacity to ensure that there's enough capacity that has must-stop obligations in real time to meet CAISO load, right? And uncertainty in CAISO load and uncertainty in resources that may show up. And so one of the reliability tools there is for CAISO to adjust the RUC upwards so that if it turns out that there's not enough capacity to meet subscheduled exports and the potential net load, that the RUC, subscheduled exports, low priority subscheduled exports would then not receive RUC awards and would therefore have a lower priority in the real-time market. Yeah, no, I mean, what we're pointing out, I mean, the RUC adjustment and the calculation of it, there's a reliability and cost trade-off. So we're not saying that the RUC adjustment should be lower or higher. I think we're saying that this is complicated and that there may be some other methods to more, that may be able to develop a better requirement that better reflects the trade-offs between reliability and cost.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I just want to make sure I understand. When you say the export does not receive awards in the RUC, does that mean that we curtail exports because of the increased low conformance and runs into infeasibility of market clearance, and therefore we curtail low priority exports in the RUC, or it is because we don't award exports?
If an export doesn't get a RUC award, my understanding is that that export can then still proceed to self-schedule into the hourhead market. All that means is that an export that has a RUC award will have a higher priority than a self-scheduled export in real time that did not get a RUC award. So my understanding is that if an export not getting an award at a RUC, it gives the exporter a warning that there's a chance, there's this higher chance that they may not be able to count on that export in the hourhead market. But if those uncertain conditions end up not materializing in real time, then that export can still self-schedule into the hourhead market and still has a chance of getting awarded. It has a lower priority.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I may have more questions follow up offline. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, any other questions?
I'm not showing any other questions at this time.
Okay, so now there's a couple of settlement errors that we reported on. I think it's worth trying to explain these and take any questions if you have questions about it. The first one was that the CAISO balancing area used an incorrect load to calculate a real-time CAISO load settlement. So it used incorrect load to calculate the prices used in real time to calculate load settlement from February 1st, 2023 to February 4th, 2024. And so to explain that, so I mean, what this graph is showing. This graph is showing the 50-minute market aggregate load schedules that's used to calculate each load aggregation point's real-time settlement price. Okay, so this settlement error was not. There was not an error in prices, right? In LMPs. There was not an error in the load used in the optimization, right? It's not an error in the load used in the market model. That was fine. This is purely an error in the way that load's settlement price is calculated for load settlement in real time. And to try to explain that a little more, load is settled in a very, from my perspective, a strange way in real time, right? So generator, if it has imbalance, right, between day ahead and 50-minute market, the generator will settle on the difference between those megawatts and the 50-minute market price. And then if a generator has a different 5-minute market schedule than the 15-minute market schedule, that generator will settle on the difference between those megawatts at the 5-minute market price. Load, however, the quantity of load that settles is the difference between the day ahead market load award and the metered award. And so to try to get a settlement value, try to get a price, a settlement value that kind of approximates, the load settling on the difference on the 50-minute market price, the difference between day and the 50-minute market load, and settling on the 5-minute market price for the quantity of load difference between the 50-minute market and 5-minute market, that the ISO calculates this load-weighted average to calculate the price for that load settles on. And so what this graph is showing here is that the weighting that the market used for the 15-minute market portion of that weighted price between the 15 and 5-minute market was off, and it was pretty badly off for some of these balancing areas. So we see on January 31st, 2023, this was kind of the load weighting used to calculate this weighted price, and that was correct. Then we go to February 1st, 2023, and it was off. So like Valley Electric, for instance, was a pretty small load aggregation point, and it had it got a very large weighting. And so what you can think about this is, assuming that the 5-minute market load weighting was correct, you can look at this as, Valley came in with very low day ahead. This error would calculate them as buying a large amount of additional load in the 15-minute market at the 15-minute market price, and then selling it back at the 5-minute market price. And so we were concerned that this could be a potentially large error. So Kyle Westendorf dug into this, spent a lot of months digging into this to try to estimate, or to look at actually kind of redo settlements with the correct load weighting to actually see how big of an issue this was. And so what he found was that this is showing the percentage of hours that the pricing error for each of these load aggregation points was above or below a certain level. So in the middle here, the light blue up to the light green, that's showing errors, pricing errors for each of these DLAPs that were less than $10. So we do see, though, in the extreme ends, the upper end and lower end, that the pricing error was between, the prices were off by more than $10 in 5 to 10% of hours. But we also noticed here that because the price was too low many times, right, during lots of hours, it was too high during lots of hours, that there's a chance that this pricing error could balance out. So again, I think the CAISO and DMM really appreciate Kyle did this kind of a resettlement to try to estimate what was the actual kind of money that ended up changing hands due to this error. So here we're seeing for each DLAP, for each DLAP, right, so the risk here is that you may have some load serving entities that paid in way too little, right? That would be a shortfall. That would have to be recovered through uplift. But then, so there's a risk then that what if there were other load serving entities that paid in way too much? That would be viewed as a surplus in this chart. In which case, then you could have a potentially large redistribution due to this pricing error. But due to Kyle kind of estimating the resettlement, what he saw was that due to prices being higher and lower, and load serving entities, buying on some days in real time and selling on some days and others, that each of these DLAPs had shortfalls that were offset by surpluses. So we're estimating is that the total, that ultimately each of these load aggregation points ended up paying in too little, and the total amount that they paid in too little by was about $11 million. But even that, though, the amount that they paid in too little was pretty proportionate to the size of those load areas, right? And so when these areas, given that overall they paid in $11 million too little, that thing gets allocated as real-time imbalance offset as an uplift to load and exports, right, in proportion to their size. So a lot of these shortfalls ended up actually getting allocated back to the entities who had paid in too little. So the total impact of the error only shifted about $7.1 million between the entities from February 1st to December 31st. And our understanding is that CAISO is working to correct this in settlements. It's not a sure thing. I think there's some complications involved, but they are working to correct this. And with that, I will call it. We only have 1 minute left or less. So any final questions?
We do have a caller in queue. Caller, your line is
Hi,
open.
Ryan. Brian, hey, Ryan, Brandon Poofall from Tucson Electric. In regards to this last slide, were these the only entities that were impacted by this?
Yeah, for this particular error, yep. My understanding is that this was a CAISO error.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I assume so. I just want to make sure. Question back to, I guess, the import locking in the 15-minute or RTPD. I guess it at a high level, I guess, is the DMM stands that what was actually executed did constitute a reliability issue, and then therefore is acceptable within the market?
I would say that I think we understand the CAISO's explanation for why they did it. but we are asking them to explain when they're going forward and what conditions are they going to do, may they continue to do that, and we're asking them to consider all their alternatives to try to get the same reliability outcome. So
Let me rephrase that.
acceptable. I mean,
If-
no, we recommend that they consider alternatives.
Well, I guess in the essence of fair play, if another entity was to do similar actions, would that be constituted as legitimate or frowned upon?
Oh, I mean, so I mean, absolutely. So any particular action would have to be looked at in its entirety in terms of in terms of what was the intention and what was the outcome. And what were the incentives? Like we talked about, this is one where so I can't talk about hypothetical about if someone did something similar, would it be frowned upon? I mean, I think the tone. I think hopefully intuitive the tone from here is that this action we frown upon this action that CAISO did, but we understand their logic for doing it. We just hope that they can find a different way of doing it, and at least to really limit the situations in which they do it.
Right. I guess at the end of the day, I guess like we had objection to it, and it sounds that like there's no, I guess, negative impact to doing it. So I guess are we to constitute then essentially that the action is permitted within the market? Or I mean, if the DMM stands is that this should not be taken, I mean, what guide rails or rules is the DMM going to enforce upon CAISO so that this doesn't happen? I think just saying that the ISO should be more transparent on it is, I mean, in my estimation, that's not even a slap on the wrist.
Well, so DMM, our role, we don't have any power to enforce anything on the CAISO, right? We're a market monitor. So our role is to identify issues, to point them out, to make recommendations to CAISO and to CAISO board. And if we think something's wrong, we can make a referral to FERC. We can also make market design recommendations to FERC. We don't have any enforcement authority. Making recommendations publicly discussing things, pointing out issues, that's our role. And so we try to do that here. And again, we do think there are issues with what they did, and we try to explain that. So we hope that that can help things move forward. But within the rules, entities that part of the WEIM design is each area can decide what its transfer limits are for each hour. That doesn't mean that there isn't potential gaming within that. There absolutely is, and we look for that. In this situation, though, we've looked at what CAISO did. We understand what they're doing from a reliability perspective. But every entity can, if they have legitimate reasons, can choose what their transfer limits in and out are. And we did put in the report some analysis of other areas that also have significantly reduced their transfer limits in and or out during a significant number of hours. So it does happen.
Right. I guess. Okay. I'm just trying to get an understanding. I mean, when the DMM's role is to make sure that there is not gaming of the system by certain entities. So, I mean, I guess it sounds like you have concerns about it, but you're not saying it's gaming of the system. So which if that's your stance, I just want to make sure that, that's kind of the stance and is going to be assessed against other entities when they or if they do make similar decisions.
Again, but in terms of interpreting whether or not something is gaming, it depends on the particular situation and on the incentives of the entity. We can't make a blanket statement about if someone else limits their transfers, if that would constitute gaming. It might.
Well, I would hope that the view of whether it's gaming or not would not be reliant on whether or not it's the ISO or another EIM entity, correct?
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely. That would not be the case. No. Again, so that's why we worked hard to try to dig into and assess why is ISO doing this? What is their justification? And we would do the same. We do the same for other areas. other EI mayors.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thanks. Okay, I think we're past time. Sorry, everybody, for keeping you 5 minutes over. Try to jam that last settlement issue in there. But please, everyone who has any other questions, you can go to the DMM website. Our email's on there, DMM's email is on there, and as our public reports, which have other contact information and other information to support what we talked about today. So yeah, please reach out to us if you have any questions. We always love to talk. Thank you very much.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Inteller Events. You may now disconnect.